Yeah, but I'm not getting my... Oh, what's going on here? Hello? I'm not sure if we're live. I'm not sure if I've got the right thing going on. Hold on. Let me see if I need to... Can people hear me? Can people see me? Let me know in the chat if I'm... Oh, I probably have the wrong... Oh, all right. Okay. Hi everyone. This is For the Love of Comics. Although I think I can't get my camera to work, so I knew that there was going to be some sort of an issue or the other. I'm not... All right, visible and audible. I guess that's something. Although I think this is... I've got too much above my head because I wanted this in a different camera, but I'm really not sure if I can do anything about it at this point of time. So there we go. These are the kind of things that we are going to have to deal with. I'm glad to see people over here. Cameras down, first button, that's button to your shirt. Yeah, I know. This is, it's strange. I've got my laptop camera on instead of the external camera that I wanted to use, but I could have sworn that I checked this. I don't know if I can change my camera in the middle of a thing. I don't know. All right, guys, give me 1 second. How much you got in class 10? All right, I'm going to end this stream, but can I come back to this? Does anyone know if I hit end stream, do I come back to the same stream or do I have to launch a new one or something like that? Because I do want to try to change my camera. I was sure that I had changed it. And all right, I'm going to start putting spammers on. I didn't realize that was going to happen. But hi, everyone. I'm still trying to mess around with this thing. All right, let's see if we can maybe turn light off, maybe. I'll see if that... no, the other one. Oh, dear. It will probably launch a new one. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, well. If we turn this one off, I think I've got a little too much light for... All right. Anyway, hi, everyone. Sorry that I'm on my crappy laptop camera instead of the nice camera I wanted to use and was using the last time. So it's a strange case of where the first time you do something, you get it right. And then I don't think that'll help. Do you want to try turning it off and see if the light helps? Ugh. No, I think we'll just keep that on. Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah, I'm going to keep this up. I apologize for my technical incompetence, as is almost to be expected. But thank you very much for joining us on our second ever live stream. This is the second one in 3 months, so we might be making a habit of it. And we've got a number of questions that people submitted on a video when I had asked for questions. At the same time, I do have the chat on over here. So I'm hopefully going to try and give you a combination of things that come from the chat as well as this. I've got these categorized according to some, I've got them categorized or grouped according to the nature of the questions. So if you want to give your chat questions in line with these, I'm going to start with some basic questions about me, some questions after that, general questions on what I read and my reading habits. Then I've got, and that second section, as you can imagine, is quite a large one. I've got some questions about specific writers, artists, publishers, which link to that. And then I've got some questions about the channel, about this channel, about my collection, and then a miscellaneous other stuff, general grouping of things. So Great. I'm so happy to see everyone here. Hello, hello, hello. Lots of familiar names, lots of new names. Excellent. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first live stream, I mean, we really haven't done anything other than one. I did do a Q&A video about a year ago, which was yo which was well received, and but then there have been a lot of new subscribers and new viewers in that last year. So I mean, for something this tiny and this homemade, I've been really overwhelmed by how many people have joined and how many people have started following this channel and watching these videos. So some of these questions are questions that I've answered before, but I have no issues going over them. I realize that there are um, a lot of new viewers, but there are also a lot of questions that were asked in that Q&A that haven't been repeated. So after this, if you're interested, you should go and take a look at that one, because that had a number of really good questions as well. And this one has some fantastic questions coming up. And I just realized that it's been a very busy week. um, and I haven't given as much preparation time to some of these questions that I perhaps should have, because they're not easy questions, so they're quite challenging. So that's why also they're organized in such a way that that I'm going to start with simple questions about myself, including what my name is. So questions I shouldn't have much of a problem answering, and then get into slightly tougher ones. Um, all right. Hello, everyone. Where do I live? I live in India. I live in New Delhi, India, and that's one of those general things that I think a lot of regular viewers or long-time viewers know about me. I'd be interested in knowing where everyone is from. Everyone on the chat, if you want to just put down the name of your city, country. I mean, one of the things I love most about my stats, so YouTube pages, you can go and look at your statistics and look at your analytics. And one of the things I love looking at is where the views are coming from, where people are. Indiana, USA, Chile. This is the thing. It's like it's all over the world, and I never thought that I would have. Hello, Serbia, Denmark, Virginia, outside of DC. Shout out from Chennai, Bangalore, Minnesota. That's amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for whom it is a Sunday evening. Thank you for those whom it is a Sunday morning, and everyone in between. Argentina, Mauritius, Belgium, more Bangalore. Fantastic. Indore, Patna, Kolkata by way of Hyderabad, Dombivli representing. Hey, a couple of people from Minnesota. Well, it's great to see everyone over here. So let's just get started with these questions. It's not going to be very formal, obviously. The problem with using this camera is it's on my laptop. So I've got to now remember not to shake the table and move the camera, which I wouldn't have had a problem with using the external one. So apologies. And if you have any problems with the volume of my voice or anything, just put it in the chat. I should be able to see it. And Ashwita, my wife, is also on this chat, so she should be able to hold on and flag things for me as well. Mumbai, Greece, Chandigarh, welcome everyone, one and all. First questions about me. From Rajat Sen. I've been watching your videos for a long time. There is one curiosity. What is your name? That's also a question from Ala Wafsi, who says, I would love to know your real name if you're comfortable sharing. I am. My name is Angshuman, or Ongshuman in the Bengali way. Angshuman is, I do give my name in a couple of videos. If you've watched my Sharing the Sandman videos that I do with my wife, we give our names at the beginning of all those episodes, although we've only done 3 so far: an introduction, preludes and nocturnes, and Doll's House. So my name is Angshuman. My wife's name is Ashwita. And Sachin Verma has questions. What languages are you comfortable with? I'm guessing English and Bengali, not sure about Hindi. That's exactly right. I'm most familiar and comfortable with English as far as speaking, reading, writing is concerned, then Hindi, which I can actually read and write, and then Bengali, which I can speak fluently, but I'm shamefully not adept at reading and writing Bengali. So those are my three languages. I'm reminded of that quote. I forget by whom. It's like being multilingual means speaking many languages badly. So I can understand a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of French, probably just from pop culture, from movies, from television shows and things like that. But I wouldn't say I'm fluent at that. Original art tour. Oh, that's some ways away. There was another question about Ashwita, my wife, and I'll get to that later. I thought I'd general questions. So those. That's me. That's my name. I live New Delhi, India. No other questions about me. Good. I'm moving on to the next category. Hey, this is going to be a quick Q&A question. Did you ever think about drawing comics? No, I can't draw. I cartoon or doodle or something like that, but I'm not an artist. I have tried writing though, which is something that we can talk about a little bit later. General questions about what I read and my reading habits. That's category 2. From the first couple of questions are from Sleepy Reader 666 and the Comic Board. Sleepy Reader 666 and the Comic Board are both not just viewers of this channel, but have their own YouTube channels on comics. I've really enjoyed watching a number of their videos. They've got wonderful communities around them, and the discussions that they have on their comment sections, etc. I mean, they may not be big, huge, flashy comics channels, but it's got a real intimacy, and I really enjoy their discussions and their videos. So from Sleepy Reader 666, I'm curious about your reading habits, times of day when you read comics. Where do you like to read them? Do you have different comics for different times and places and moods? Do you like rereading comics? What percentage of comics do you think you reread? And they tell a story of one YouTuber reads all his comics twice during the week that he buys them, then boxes them up. It's interesting. And related to this list of questions, I'm categorizing them. The Comic Board asks, I'm curious of how often you reread books in your collection. Yeah, there are so many great books out there, and I add so many new ones each month that I sometimes feel guilty for buying new ones when I have so much to reread. Yes, I think that is something a lot of us who buy and buy on a regular basis may feel that way. There was actually a time when I would have laughed at that idea of someone buying so many books that they haven't read the books that they've bought, especially when it comes to comics, which can be quite expensive, as everyone here knows. So there was a time when I was like, how can you possibly buy more than you can read? That just sounds completely wasteful, but it does happen. So there is, feeling guilty about doing that makes sense, because I think we all remember a time, or we may be, in a time where that sounds nonsensical. Do you set any goals for reading? Any goals for rereading, monthly or yearly goals? So let me talk a little bit about this. And I'd, as always, love to know about your experiences or the way you approach things in the chat, which is... So a related question, have you read every book in your library at least once? From Joseph. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say yes, because that's the bare minimum, you would think. But there are books that I haven't read. There are books that I haven't gotten to. There was a time, and I think this is, there was a time when I found that I had bought more in the last 12 months than I had read by quite a lot. Like, I would say that I hadn't read even half of what I'd bought. And I stopped buying at that time. It was sort of a mathematical realization I came to. And I was just like, well, this, what's the point of this? I mean, this is just hoarding. So I had to do it as a conscious decision that you are not going to buy any more books until you read what you have. So at this point of time, I would say I've read more than three quarters of the books that I have. Maybe maybe more than that. Maybe I've read five-eighths of the books that I have in my collection at least once. I've definitely read many of them many times. I want to keep the number of books that I haven't read to a bare minimum, but I think there will always be such books, and that depends on how you buy things, because sometimes I buy things because I've heard of them, and this comes to like, do you have different moods? Is like, yes, I could buy something, but I don't feel like reading it immediately. And sometimes it might be because I know it's going to be heavy, or I know it's going to be depressing, or I know it's going to be very emotionally ringing, and I'm not in that zone. Sometimes it can be the other way around, where I want something serious and meaty, and I know something's going to be a series of jokes or gags, and that's great, and I would like to read that, but that's not what I'm looking for right now. So it really depends on the time. It depends on how much time I have. And usually these days, I find myself reading either on weekend afternoons or at night before going to bed. I would love it to be at other times as well, but with work from home, especially, it's not. I mean, your days just get kind of filled up with stuff. So I want to make time. So I don't have any monthly or yearly goals. I don't set myself any number target that I've got to finish 50 books or 100 books this year. And I think approaching it from that point of view is a little odd for me, because then I'm trying to hit a number rather than read a book. So I don't have that kind of target, but I do set targets for myself in the way that I say, I'd like to read more books, or I haven't read as many books that I'd like to read. And then I make certain other kinds of decisions. So similar to this buying but not reading, there was a time when I found that I was watching a lot of TV shows and I was binging, so I was just watching one episode after another. And it's very easy to fall into that, especially if you're watching quality shows. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because these are good things. But I just realized that the television was becoming the time sink that would take up anything that would otherwise have gone to reading. So for me personally, I had to make this decision of like, no, you're only going to watch one episode of something in a day, maybe with lunch or maybe with dinner or something like that. And you're not going to watch TV other than that. And that just automatically frees up time to read comics, to read books, times of day, therefore at night, in the afternoon, if I've got a Saturday or a Sunday. Sometimes I'll order books, they'll come in, and I'll open the package and read it immediately. So that all depends on the book. If it's a collection of short stories, for example, if it's something I know will be fast, if it's something that I can zip through, at least the first read can be very fast before I come back to it and read it again. I can do it that way as well. Usually thicker novels, which is a lot of the kind of comics that I read, I save them and I put them aside for next up. But things jump around all the time. But how I reread, that's a really complex question, because you do have new books to read. So are you going to reread when you haven't gotten to the new book? And I think yes. I mean, you can. Rereading something is both luxuriating in something that's familiar and revisiting something for a particular reason, but also because I think reread sometimes calls to you. You're like, I want to check my assumptions on that, or I want to see if that's still as good as I remember it being, or there was something that I wanted to talk about, but I'm not sure. And I think that is part of you becoming, it's kind of like new reading in a way, because as you read new stuff and you develop and grow, I find that sometimes I want to reread old stuff to say that, well, now that I've read this, will that still be good to me? Or, well, if I find this derivative, is it truly derivative, or am I misremembering something? So the way that you change as a reader can get affected. So I reread things quite often. And sometimes I'll reread things because I'm too tired to read a new thing. So, like late at night, if I want to read something, sometimes I'll pick up something that I'm quite familiar with, that I've read many times before, so that even if I doze off in the middle of it, I'm not actually interrupting a new experience. So it's kind of arbitrary in certain ways. Percentage of comics you reread, it's probably a low percentage, just because it's a lot of comics now. So therefore, um, have you read The Far Side by Gary Larson? Yes. And The Far Side, I mean, the reason why that's sensitive is because there are certain kinds of comics and newspaper comic strips or panels, even single page things like Dennis the Menace, or the comics of Tom Gold. These are great books to have because you can pick them up and read a couple, and it's because they're separate and because they are individual pages, that's the whole story in itself. They make for things that you can slip in at any point of time and read at any point of time. So I always like to mix things up, because not everything can be a 2-hour read, not everything can be a 3-hour read, and certain books will obviously take longer than that depending on density. So I like having those kind of books. Kate Beaton, like people who do have things that are web comic based or newspaper comic based stuff that you can read very quickly and get going. Why don't you like the omnibus format? All right. So I don't like, I think it's not true to say, I mean, maybe I've misrepresented myself. It's not so much that I don't like the omnibus format. I really do appreciate omnibuses that put together a collection of stories that you wouldn't otherwise be able to put together or collect, or put together something chronologically, have a comprehensive approach to it. And I do like the value for money, because often omnibuses tend to be, I mean, not if they go out of print, but they tend to be a good value for money rather than buying 7 different trade paperbacks or 6 different trade paperbacks. What the problem that I have with omnibuses is I don't read them as much, or I tend to, like when we're talking about this thing of picking a book up or having bought something and it's sitting there and not reading it, more than likely omnibuses are going to sit there and not get read. It's almost as if, having bought them, I've done what they're there for, which is I wanted issues 1 through 45 in my collection. I've got the entire run of blah blah blah, and I've done it. So now that I've done it, I don't actually need to read it, which I find odd. Or I've read it in other format. Maybe I borrowed trade paperbacks from my friends and I really liked it, so now I want to own it. And this can happen with any format. It's not just an omnibus, but you can buy something that you've read somewhere else and then never read the volume that you bought because you've already read it. You just wanted to own it. So, and because that can happen with any book, and because that can happen, and it's not just with comics, I find omnibuses to encourage that. At least for me it gets encouraged to have that for the sake of possession rather than the sake of reading. So I don't get to sit down and open an omnibus and read it, even if it is to read a section of it. I don't do that because it's not comfortable most of the time. You've got to have the proper chair and the proper table and all of that kind of stuff. And I like production. I like hardcovers. So that's why I think of slim hardcovers, as I always say, is like, that's my favorite format, is because it gives me the solidity and the seriousness and the respect that I think a physical book has, but also it's portable and it's readable, because to me, the value comes from reading. And if you're going to reread, if you're just going to you're going to be struck by something, as I was saying, one day you thought, oh, that was a good story and I should go back to that. It's, for me personally, I would never pull out an omnibus to read that story. I would pull out a trade paperback. I would pull out a single, volume, a hardcover or something like that, but not a big fat omnibus. And maybe people are different, so I think people make choices according to their behavior and what they recognize. So I can recognize that in myself, is that I buy omnibuses to have on the shelf and to say that I own it and to have the complete collection. because they've got that presence, and of course they look beautiful, and they're like huge big fat books, and they make you look very serious as a reader. But if you're not reading them, I mean, if I'm not reading them, then why have them? It'll get to that hoarding thing, or it'll get to the thing where you just want to show off. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered all these questions. Hello. So read comics twice during the week. You bought them and boxed them up. I think this applies more to singles and single issues, which I don't buy that many single issues. It's not something that's very common over here in India, although I have some single issues. I know people who collect single issues and buy single issues, but that's not the way I read most of my comics. So it's not about a weekly or a monthly pull list. It's not about when they're being released. I'm not at all a current person. I treat comic books pretty much the way I treat prose books. There'll be some classics, there'll be some new releases, there'll be books I've heard of that I've been meaning to get to. So I like bound volumes, and I like reading them the way that I've always read them. I mean, when I was a kid, there were comics, but they were standalone single floppy comics that you could buy, and they were very common, and they were relatively cheap and things like that. Not necessarily the American Marvel DC type of floppies, but them as well, but a whole bunch of them, and reprinted in India, things like that, which just don't exist anymore. And I'm also I'm probably less patient in my old age. I want to start and I want to finish a story. I don't think I have the patience for reading something 32 pages or 22 pages a month and then waiting for another month and getting that, etc. So for me, I think even if I lived in a place like the United States, I'd probably be a trade waiter for sure. Tolstoy or Dostoevsky? Dostoevsky. But I mean, it's a close one, but Dostoevsky's my guy. Yeah, so no goals, nothing. Do you remember the first comic you ever read? Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I don't think it would literally be the first comic I ever read, but I remember the Panchatantra comics from Amar Chitrakatha, and there was a story of. This is a question that came up in my previous Q&A as well. So, the value of friendship. It was about birds and a turtle, and yeah, those Amar Chitrakatha, for those of you who don't know, is an Indian comics publishing company that publishes books on mythology, comics on historical figures, on folk tales, on myth and oral tradition stories, a lot of them, most of them from India and of Indian origin, but often from other cultures as well. And a lot of us have grown up, or at least people my age, grew up reading those comics and a lot of those comics. So I think that, along with Tintin, Asterix, and some Harvey comics that were around when I was a kid, those were probably the first comics that I read. I lay in bed while reading omnibuses. Well, you've got better upper body strength than I do. It probably, I mean, like I've dropped a phone on my face when holding it above me. An omnibus is definitely breaking my nose for sure. First story arc of a series and then buy the TPBs after that. Yeah, I can see that. And I think, if you live in a place where you can buy singles, and it's a great way to try them out, because you may not like it. You may not like where it's going. You may not like the way the art and the writing is working together. So I think buying singles at the start of a series is a fantastic way of getting 6 or 7 things in a month and seeing which ones you want to continue with. And I know people who've tried, tried a lot of different things, and that's something that I still do when singles are available cheap. Either they're being sold used, or they're being sold online, and I've heard of something and I've never tried it. I'll buy a single if I can get it for like 50 rupees, or which is less than $1, or 60 rupees, and just see if that's my if that's to my liking. If that is, it's sort of a way of physically with paper checking it out, the way that you can check out PDFs or look inside on Amazon and stuff like that. ACKs were extremely boring for me. Tinkle was good. Well, Tinkle is Amar Chitra Katha. I mean, that's just a series. It's an anthology series, but it's the same publisher. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think, and this is an interesting thing about Amar Chitra Katha, is my wife has, she was looking through my childhood Amar Chitra Kathas, and she had different ones. So I didn't know. I thought they were just reprinting the old ones. But I think over the years, something has also changed in their tone and their presentation. But I know what you mean if you think they're boring. Have you ever worried during your lit comic reading career that you were being too escapist and indulgent in the reading rather than in life matters? This is a fantastic question. I mean, I think this is a fantastic question because it's not just about comics, it's about literature. And it's sort of a question. I don't know. I mean, we could start getting into being heavy right now. I thought I would start with the light questions and get into the heavy questions, but this is a good one because I have, of course, and I have a very strong opinion, of course, on that as well. I'm going to copy that, Joseph, and maybe get to it a little later because let's not scare everyone away right at the beginning of the thing. Hold on one second, guys. Ashwita, will you do me a favor? Ashwita? Oops. Okay, one second. Oh, never mind. Yeah. I'll come. It's okay. I was just seeing if one of them. Can you just see if you can pull it away from me? I'm just trying to see. Yeah, turn it away again. I'm just trying to see if the lights can be adjusted a little bit. It's it's all right. It's okay. What is the meaning of life? All right. Well, Life Comics Philosophy was the title of my previous Q&A. So it's not the first time that's been. Pontus Presents, hello. Another channel that I really enjoy. Pontus Presents has a way of shooting books. I mean, he does these videos on Folio Society and other fantastic hardcover editions of classic books. And I'd strongly, if you like book on video, which I really, I really appreciate that. I like YouTube channels that talk about comics, and I like YouTube channels that talk about books, but I also like the ones that really celebrate the physical form of the book, as well as the stories, the themes, and things like that. You've got, the Folio Society vids, exactly. Among others. I mean, it's very, very good stuff. Good to see you here. Bounce light off instead of direct cast. Yes, exactly. This is what I was trying to do. I was trying to get a bounce going, but the problem is with this silly. It's probably too bad. Nah. Yeah. The problem is it's the webcam camera. Anyway, I'm not going to get. I'm not probably going to get any better. Have you read One Piece? No, I haven't read One Piece. I've heard a lot about One Piece, but like many other series, I think I'm a little intimidated by how many there are. Did you consider doing a prose books reviews? I did briefly, but it's. I mean, to be honest, and this is getting into some of these other questions that have been, do you read prose? Do you read prose novels and other novels, etc.? And I do, and I used to read a lot. I find myself reading less prose fiction these days. I think my prose reading today is mainly nonfiction and reportage and op-eds and people writing about science or history or politics or things like that. Nonfiction, the fiction prose has taken a back seat because, and I've read a lot over the years. I've enjoyed a lot over the years. I like comics because comics to me seem very new and they seem full of things. With the prose, I'm not saying there aren't good writers out there. Of course there are. And of course there are great things being written. But to me, I've just got to the point where it seemed less of absolute discovery and more about understanding how this person has finessed something that you've seen many times before, which is also true in comics to a certain extent, but less true. It just, for me, it seemed that I was finding more new stuff in comics and than in prose. So, and I also thought that there are a lot of channels doing the kind of prose videos that I would make, and looking at the books that I would look at and things like that. In comics, I didn't find as many. I thought there were comics channels, but a lot of the comics, I mean, there weren't as many comics channels as there are prose book channels. That's for one. And then a lot of comics channels were like about a lot of other things, not just about comics, but about movies and television shows and things like that. Not so much about the comics form as about the comic stories. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it just seemed like there was something I could do that was a little different, which with a prose thing, I would have just been another. I mean, I would have found more stuff of the kind that I wanted to make. So, yeah. And I mean, and superhero comics. Superhero comics are a genre, but they're a very predominant genre. So and it's completely understandable to me why that would dominate. It's the most popular, so of course you would have most number of viewers for that, or most people interested in that, or most number of copies of books being sold, so most people would be able to put that stuff up online. And manga, I mean, manga is not a genre, but the readership again is huge. It's humongous. So I mean, and I get it and I understand it, but it seemed like there's a place that I could make videos on comics because of the comics I read. And a lot of this had to do with, well, and there are, as I said, there are a couple of people, and there's someone else I'll talk about in a little bit. There are a couple of videos, channels that make the kind of videos that I really enjoy, that talk about the books that I like to read, and I'm happy that they're there. I wouldn't want everyone to be making the same kind of videos, although that does happen. And I think that's one of those things about YouTube channels, is that say since I started working on YouTube and I've gotten interested in cameras or microphones or something like that, you'll have one camera and you'll have like 100 channels who all make 100 reviews on that one camera, and the next month another camera will come out and they'll make every one of them. And so you follow a particular channel because of the way that they approach, but also when you want to buy a camera, you're going to want to watch 100 views on that camera. You're not going to spend a lot of money without having done your homework. At least you shouldn't be. And then you just get interested in things like that. And so somewhere I think there are certain things when it comes to comic books, when it comes to the superhero or the manga format or the superhero genre, that could work that way, is that I want to take a look at this before I spend my money on it. And that's a very valuable thing if you've got a channel out there that's doing those kind of reviews. But that's not the kind of reviews, or that's not the kind of videos I can make. I'm not up to date. I'm not current. I don't get my hands on, publishers don't send me whatever they're publishing recently. Although, if you are a publisher and you want to, I mean, I would say no. But that's not the kind of videos I would make. That's not the kind of channel I would make. So therefore, I don't want to make it about what just came out or whether you should buy this or not or things like that. It's more like, well, this is what I've really enjoyed reading, and this is what I've really enjoyed discovering. So maybe someone else will also have that little have that thing over there. Right. Okay. I lost my. Where was I on the questions? Right. General questions about what I read and my reading habits. Gore Vidal, another person whose videos I've really enjoyed. There is an entire community of people on YouTube who make videos on comics, not because they want to show off the latest thing, but because they want to talk about how that comic works for them. And if you haven't checked out Gore Vidal's channel, I would say that he brings a really unusual approach, which I found to be quite captivating, where where he talks while he turns through the pages, but what he's talking about is so perfectly formed as expressions of thoughts and experiences, and he has a terrific voice, and the delivery of it, it's something that on one level is so low tech but high concept, because like comics, when you put text and image together, or when you juxtapose two images together, it's the alchemy of those two things. So thank you for stopping by. What's your opinion of the comics medium there? Is it as respected one like films, novels, and paintings? No, I like comics. I like to think that the world is changing and people are respecting comics a lot more. You've got, comics winning the Pulitzer, but I mean, that happened a long time ago. And people keep talking about how comics are now respectable, but every time someone does that, it's as if like you had to mention it because you think that they're not. Otherwise, you wouldn't be saying that. Like, no one goes around saying people now think film is respectable. They never have to say that. They just do it. So I'm really looking forward to that time when no one says comics are today not considered blah, blah, blah anymore. I think some of it, I don't know what the confusion is. I think the confusion is about exposure, it's about availability. It's about the dominance of certain genres or certain things, which, even if someone says a comic book movie, you're thinking Marvel, DC. You don't think, oh, History of Violence, Road to Perdition, American Splendor. These were comic book movies. You don't think along those lines. You don't think that way. Comic book means a certain thing, and maybe it's got to do with the word comic, or the word comics, or is it supposed to be funny, etc., etc. But I think it's getting there. I think it's improving. The comics medium in India is, I think, the same as the comics medium anywhere in the world almost. There is popular stuff, there is derivative stuff, there is very unique indie stuff, there is very self-indulgent stuff. It's a mixture, but it's definitely not an industry and not something that people can consider getting into as a career in the ways that maybe people in the United States, they can think, I want to be a comic book writer, I want to be a comic book artist, I want to make comics. I don't think that's true over here, but is it even true for people thinking they want to be prose writers? Is it I don't know. It's a difficult thing. I think the respect comes in like tiny increments, and it really should be coming faster, or because I mean, like, how much more do you need in order to think about things as far as respectability is concerned? It's like there's great comics out there, there's great comics being made all the time, and there's like literally thousands of great comics already in existence. So I don't know. I don't know. So I think that's why a certain kind of approach and a certain kind of discussion and a certain kind of attitude is important. And I think readership is important. I think, creators are going to be creators, but people who read, you set yourself higher standards, you want better things, you demand better things, and prove that it's as literary or artistic a medium as anything else is I think the way it goes. All right, let me get back to these questions. Some more questions about how I read and what I like to read. Urosh Velikovic, I think, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, asks, who is your favorite writer of the British invasion except Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, and which era of comics is your favorite? So British invasion, I guess, I don't ever think about these things in these categories, but I've enjoyed work by Grant Morrison. I've enjoyed work by Jamie Delano and Hellblazer. Who are the? I mean, would Mark was Mark Millar part of the British invasion? Or I mean, that's the thing. I don't know these things from the point of view of what time is the British invasion supposed to be. Peter Milligan, was he part of the British invasion? You could let me know in in the comments if there is. Oh, there's a whole bunch of different things going on over here. But what era of comics is my favorite? I think, I think it's the current era. I mean, I really like comics being made today. I think people have, built on what has come before, stood on the shoulders of giants, etc., etc. And every year for the last 20 years, you've had brilliant comics coming out, and so and more and more, and from more and more publishers, and from more and more places in the world. So um I think when thinking about American superhero comics, or American comics, you can think about things like the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and things like that. You can think about European comics of, well, I mean, Tintin started in the 30s and went all the way into, I think, the early 70s at least. So I mean, as far as an era of comics, it's like a continuous thing, and I really like what's happening with comics today. I like the fact that so many people are doing so many different kinds of comics, and the fact that comics are a medium that means they're being used as things for autobiography. They're being used for journalism, and they're being used for science and for teaching and for getting interesting concepts out there. And I think the more we see about things that have to do with information and disinformation and social justice, I mean, there is a lot of potential over here for the unique power of comics, as far as cognition is concerned, as far as understanding or getting the message or getting how something relates. So I really like the modern era, if that's an era. I really like what's going on today. With comics, American comics in the 90s, especially superhero, are my least favorite. Yeah, and I understand that, because I mean, again, we usually think about the speculator boom, or but even a lot of things like the start of Image Comics, because of something that happened over there, and there's more stuff happening in America in the 90s than just those variant covers and foil and all of that stuff. I mean, Love and Rockets was still being made in the 90s, and some of the best Love and Rocket stories may have been there in the 90s. It depends on what we are seeing, but again, I think things have a tendency to dominate. So superhero stuff, Marvel, DC stuff, they dominate, and they dominate in a way that I think today may not be. I mean, maybe it is for the movies, I don't know. I'm not a very connected or plugged in person, so there were some other questions about and that I'll get to, I think, about how I pick what is upcoming. And sometimes I realize this is that I'm not very aware of what's coming up. I mean, maybe I'll know one or two things, but I really have enjoyed the side benefit of this channel and being online on YouTube is people tell me what's coming up, and people tell me what to read, and people tell me and give me recommendations. I've become much more knowledgeable about comic books and comics and publications, editions, anything. I've become much, much more knowledgeable since I started this channel and started interacting with everyone over here, which is fantastic. So I appreciate the fact that people ask me some questions as if I'm some sort of an expert, but actually it's a neural net thing. It's like somebody tells me this and I can say this to somebody else, and it's just like, it's fantastic. So, which is another reason why I think these kind of discussions, why I enjoyed the last live stream, why I've been asking you questions in my community page about Discord and things like that, is because I really like that input, especially because we have people from all over the world, as we can see in this chat, and everyone's got different experiences, and everyone's exposed to different comics and exposed to them in different formats, but it's all still comics, and it's that kind of this is funny stuff over here. All right. if this is not entertaining the chat, certainly will keep you entertained. But what we have with different publishers and what we have with different creators and what they're trying, etc., is a lot of fun today. And it's virtually impossible for any one person to keep up with it all. I mean, that's why all of these places have research teams, and uh, that's what we can do. I think is you can tell me what I should be taking a look at, and as you know from my recent reads and new acquisitions videos, and a lot of these things, where there'll be a number of books that I would never have picked up, or I would have never have known about, or I wouldn't have thought twice about, until somebody said, hey, since you like this, you'll really like this, or since you started talking about this, why don't you take a look at that as well. It doesn't mean I love everything, although I understand that sometimes it comes across as I do. But it's the discovery and the trying of new things and the reading of new things that today is possible, in a way, because of how much is being created, and because of the internet, and because of availability in different areas to different extents, that I think makes this, as people are fond of saying, the true golden age of comics writing and comics. Samuel SG, Samuel, hi. What are your favorite Spanish comics? I haven't read that many Spanish comics. I did read that anthology, Spanish Fever, that I talked about in one of my videos, which is where I am, going through and saying, oh, that person looks interesting. So there were a couple of people here that I really enjoyed, but I can't find works of theirs, larger works translated into English, which has always been an issue. I've really enjoyed. Obviously, I enjoyed David Rubin's The Hero. I've talked about that in a couple of my videos. I enjoyed Santiago Garcia and David Rubin's collaboration on Beowulf, and Paco Roca's Wrinkles is just a fantastic book. And it's a fantastic book on many levels, because it takes something like Alzheimer's, and aging, and it's something that can be extremely dark and extremely I mean, heartbreaking to think about, and makes out of that something so beautiful and wonderful that I don't still know how he did it. So if any of you, if you haven't read Wrinkles by Paco Roca, I think that might be my fame. Again, I haven't read that many, so of the few things that I've read, those are the ones. Those are the ones that have really. Really worked for me. What's going on over here? From Hell, yeah, Grendel. I really enjoyed. I got the first two omnibuses of Grendel, and I really liked it. And I've never been able to find the third omnibus, so I'm stuck. And this is we've got some questions about this kind of stuff happening as well. And it's really yeah, for someone like me who doesn't read digitally, who doesn't read electronically, etc. That's really irritating, because I was really enjoying Grendel until I stopped. Hey, a super chat from All the Fixins podcast. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Good morning. Glad to see people joining. Samuel says, I'll have to check it out. I've only read The House by Paco Roca. I've been looking for more Paco Roca comics after Wrinkles, because Wrinkles was such a, and the thing is that I make it sound heavy. It's light and it's funny. I mean, to think that aging and losing your memory and not knowing where you are could be played as a funny way sounds absolutely horrible. It sounds like it's the worst idea you've ever heard of, but it's really a magnificent achievement in comic storytelling, in my opinion. So similar to this, so we've had a question about the British invasion, about Spanish comics. Rajat Sen asks, would you like to read Indian regional comics? In West Bengal, there are a wide array of comics and graphic novels which nobody talks about, and I think they're pretty underrated. I don't doubt it. Of course, I would love to. My problem is that, of course, I can only read in English, so I need things translated, and I need things published and circulated in a way that I can get them. And I think this is one of those things that I always feel jealous about as far as local publishing is concerned, not just in languages, but many of you might be in regions where you can attend independent creator festivals. You might have local comic shops that stock not just Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, but also zines and things that are being made locally. And that's just to me, that's brilliant, to have that ability. And I understand that not everything will be polished and not everything will be fantastic, but I love that ability to have that range of access where it's not just one homogenized sort of product. So I would love to look at regional work, but someone will have to translate it for me. And this is just the same. It's the same thing holds true for regional Indian comics as holds true for international comics. I mean, there are fantastic comics being made in Europe that I don't get to read because they're not translated into English. So it's the same thing with Bengali. It's the same thing with Hindi. There are independent comics being published in India that are published in Hindi and in English. And I think that's a great idea as well. Thank you, Gabriel D in Super Chat. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying the channel. I'm glad all of you are enjoying the channel. I do want to take this opportunity to say that I'm completely flabbergasted by how many people enjoy the channel and how many people show up to watch, these long rambling videos that I make in my living room, because that was never, I never expected that. But the fact that people get into conversations and over here in the comments, people write to me but also talk to each other, that I think is just is next level. I've really been very overwhelmed by that. And I've had a lot of people tell me that are saying, hey man, your comment section is amazing. So that's the polite way, like when someone so it's like when you've got to find something to praise. But I get more praise on my comment section than on my videos, where people say that comments, I've not seen anything like that on YouTube. I haven't seen anything like this. Look at, like, people are writing paragraphs, people are writing analyses, and I'm just like, yeah, that's right, they are. Hello from Italy. Yes. Yes, my ramblings are look at, I think I'm only, I don't even know, I think I'm 1/8 the way through this Q&A, or at least these questions that I've created over here. But yes, Rajat, I would love to read Indian regional comics. I would love to read, and I've often found that to be the case. I found that when there are things that are more niche, and maybe this is because of that, it's the same thing that I think we have all experienced, is that if something is not being created for 500,000 people, if it's not being created for the masses, the expectation of who you're supposed to make happy isn't trying to make everyone happy. So you end up with things that are less generic. You end up with things that are less sort of, let's appeal to everyone. Let's make it as simple as possible. Let's make it as easily digestible as possible. And therefore, I think things that are niche, things that are regional, things that are localized, because they've got a very specific audience in mind, because they're speaking in a very particular tone, they tend to have a lot of flavor. They tend to have a lot of individuality, which I find to be quite artistic, because it's about the crafting of it. It's not just about a factory production of cookie cutter kind of stuff. So I don't doubt that they are underrated. But probably one way of looking at it, or maybe one way that we can reconcile ourselves to it, is they're good because not that many people talk about it. I don't know if that's actually fair, but yes, I would love to. And I think translations and getting things out there is a very big part of, and that's why I like publishers who do translations of comics from other countries, because they're not really in it for the money. They're doing it to say that, have you guys taken a look at this? Have you guys checked this out? This is really interesting. And that's the same thing for publishers who do these archival kind of they're never going to make any money from like preserving this for posterity, but they do it because somewhere it's going to contribute to the thinking and the vocabulary. Ivan Osterman asks, do you read manga too? I know you've mentioned Lone Wolf and Cub and Nausicaa, but I was wondering if there are other mangas you've explored. Yes. So I've made videos on Akira was actually the first video I ever made on this channel on the Akira 35th anniversary box set. I've made videos on Akira, Lone Wolf, and Cub. I've mentioned in my shelf videos, you've seen most of the small collection of manga that I have. I've mentioned Pluto in one of my top tens by Urasawa. I've really enjoyed the works of Jiro Taniguchi, who I consider to be, I think he's just one of my favorite comics creators of all time. Now he's just jumped there, with like 4 or 5 books. So I got something over here. I am now. I did read Attack on Titan. I think I've read 1.5 of the colossal editions, which I really enjoyed. Bride Story is a series that's set on the Mongolian nomadic tribes. It's just an amazing comic. I've really enjoyed Bride Story. I should get back to that because I've read, I think, about 8 volumes of it, and then they stopped becoming available over here. And the person that I'm launching myself into is Tatsumi. So I have one of his books from Drawn and Quarterly were published by Drawn and Quarterly. This is in the American style, so it's been the Western style, I guess. It's been flipped, which is, usually I like reading manga the way it's supposed to be read, etc. But if the design and the thing is okay, so I've heard a lot about Tatsumi. But yes, there's a lot to read and there's a lot to explore. It's an entire culture of comics that for many years has been taking it seriously and have been putting a lot of talent and effort into it. So yeah, I can't these Drawn and Quarterly books, as soon as I found out that they were in hardcover, I had to have them in hardcover. So I ran across 1 or 2 in paperback, and then I was like, oh, should I? So I was like, no, maybe I can get them in hardcover. So I've been able to get Goodbye and the Pushman in hardcover so far. So I want to keep my eyes on that. Emma, yes. Bride Story is by Morikawa Kaoru. I've not read Emma, which is the previous series, which is set in Victorian England, but because that never became available over here, so I was lucky enough to get copies of Bride Story. I thought it was, and that's one of those manga where I'm like, how come more people aren't talking about Bride Story? Because it's so good in so many different ways. But I guess there's so much to talk about, so it's, and then again, how do I know? Maybe they are talking about it. I'm just not very connected. Are you planning on getting more artist edition books, Prince Valiant Studio Edition? I did buy the Prince Valiant Studio Edition, but it's with my sister in the United States, and I have no idea when I'm going to get my hands on it. My sister's basement is just full of books. They can't do anything over there because I've just filled it all up. Even if I was able to go there tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to empty out even half of what's in there. It's ridiculous, but I did get it because I found it on sale. In fact, someone pointed it out to me in the comments that, hey, it's on sale over here, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna run and grab it right now because these artist editions are quite expensive, but they are so good. The studio edition, artist edition, gallery edition, they're all the original art replications. Fantastic. Not Censored has a question related to Ivan Osterman's manga question is, have you thought about exploring the manhwa, webtoon, and manga mediums a bit more? I know you have a few mangas in your collection. Death Note is another one that I have that I really enjoyed, and I know that's a popular manga, but I thought that was a very clever and very well done comic as well. But as I recall correctly, you weren't exactly that well versed. I'm not. I mean, but I think Tatsumi and I just recently, Jiro Taniguchi's Summit of the Gods is a book that I've now gotten 3.5 volumes into, and it's superb. So I if I can find more books like that, Sunny was another series that I really enjoyed. If I can find more books like that, I think like I think manga is very much like using the word comics. It's not a genre, but it's often treated as a genre because people think about specific things when they think about manga, depending on what is the most popular, what is the most common, or what is the thing that they like. Of course, there are all kinds of manga, just the way that there are all kinds of American comics or all kinds of European comics. They can be in a variety of genre. They can be, I know there are certain things stylistically, maybe the way the faces look, etc., that people think are across genres, but it's very, very different. So I would definitely be up for exploring more manga. I am definitely going to be doing it. I'm going to be following the same logic that I follow for all of comics, is that I'll read something because it sounded interesting. If I really like it, I'll find out what more those creators have done, what more those publishers have published, so it's kind of a constant discovery. You're just trying to find out, like, one road leads to another sort of thing. um, Anything on web comics in my knowledge? That's true. I haven't done anything on web comics, and that's because I don't read that many web comics. I do prefer reading web comics by far to reading digitally something that was designed for paper, because I think when you scan and put it up online, or it's just, I'm not a digital reader. I don't read, I mean, other than news and yeah, so I mean, I read digitally. I shouldn't say I don't read digitally. I read digitally, but I read certain kinds of things digitally. And comics, web comics would be the only ones that I would read. When people have designed it to be read online, when people have designed it to be scrolled through or read in a particular way where the layout has played a conscious part of it, not just where you've scanned and put something up online, because that makes a big difference to me. Webtoons definitely sounds, from what I've heard, like a good way of exploring a lot in a very easy an easy way. um Eclipse Comics in the 80s reprinted a chunk of a manga series called Kamui. All right. Okay. That sounds interesting. Again, I mean, anything that is in volumes always plays a very good ping pong. 2 volumes uh by Viz and Kodansha, because they put out books and they put them together in good, handsome ways. I got the Ghost in the Shell. That's one. Ghost in the Shell is one of those that I watched as an anime first and then read the manga later. Um, but again, because publishers are out there putting it out in forms that I can collect, that I can read, I get to do that. So that's good. Single issues are harder for me to get, so sometimes I will source them and find them, but if it's a long run in singles, um I don't know. It'll have to be like, oh, I've got to find it on eBay. I got lucky that the entire run was being sold in one go. I picked it up. Now it's my sister's basement. I got to figure out a way to get my hands on it. Um, yeah, well, okay. So shonen. Yeah, I know, the shonen scene. And I mean, like, there are categories of manga. I mean, people have explained it to me before, but age. I mean, I know that there are categories and I know that there are things, but I like anything is like, I don't mean that I only like the realistic and don't like the science fiction, or I wouldn't like the fantasy, etc., etc. It's not that. It just depends. Done. Yotsuba. That was one that I read 1 volume of, and I thought it was great, and I need to get more volumes of that. That was very funny, very cute. From what I remember. That's another thing, is that sometimes I think it's a little intimidating when someone says, okay, that's got 26 volumes or 32 volumes or something like that. One of the reasons why I like Lone Wolf and Cub, although it does have a definite ending, is that you don't necessarily have to, I mean, I know this might sound sacrilegious, you don't have to read every single chapter of Lone Wolf and Cub. You don't have to read every single story. You kind of get the idea with whichever story you're reading. I mean, every story has value, but it's not absolutely necessary plot wise, which makes it an easier series. Because if I picked up volume 18 or something like that because I found it in a secondhand bookstore, I'm not going to put it back. I'll pick it up, I'll buy it, because I know I can read volume 18, even if I don't have volume 15, for example. It's that kind of thing. So series like that, I think, and I know someone was saying that it's a shame about the Usagi Yojimbo volumes and them going, and I really don't understand why Usagi Yojimbo should ever be out of print, or and especially when you've got the Usagi Saga, Dark Horse has put them out. I don't understand that, but it's kind of the same way. I mean, Usagi Yojimbo is definitely a series that you should be able to just pick up any volume of and read and enjoy. I mean, yes, I know that you want to read beginning to end, and a lot of us want that kind of story arc thing, but it's like Lone Wolf and Cub is like Samurai Jack. Yeah. I mean, like, they will have an ending. There will be a particular ending that will be very rewarding if you've been following along for a long time and things like that. But in the middle, those chapters, I think, should be just enjoyed for what they are. And if you know manga like that I can just pick up any volume of, like, people have recommended Phoenix to me, but like any volume of Phoenix seems really, really hard to find. It's just, or you'll find one and that's like $85 for a 120 page book or something like that. It's not quite the way that I would be able to get into that. Moving along, questions from Charlie Clausen. What are some little known comics you think deserve more recognition? Oh, this is a very good question. It's a very good question. First of all, I'd like to say that I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question, because I live in India and I buy from Amazon. So again, I can't go into comic book stores and find hidden treasures most of the time. I don't have access to indie or old comics that were very niche or had a very short print run, etc. Anything that I encounter will have to at least have been popular enough to have been exported to India. I mean, and I know that you can go out and somehow have some magical discoveries, etc. But I do think, and I know, so I made a video on Richard Sala after he died. And I felt really bad. And I said that in that video because I've been meaning to make a video on Richard Sala ever since I started the channel. And Richard Sala was one of those people who I was surprised that more people don't know. And now this is not, there are a lot of people, I think, who are very unique and very interesting and very odd, and many people will not know of them. And I think that's fine because they're unique and odd. So when it comes to, say, accessibility and how easily digestible someone is when they're pleasing. And I don't mean this as an insult at all. Like, for example, let's say Darwin Cook. Darwin Cook is very accessible. That doesn't mean that Darwin Cook is simple or like he's fantastic. He's one of my favorites, but he's very accessible. So when you look at a Darwin Cook page, you can imagine 100 people loving it instantly because it looks beautiful. It looks great. When you read it, it feels great. So you can understand that. So I can think of a lot of people that I love, but I can also understand why they don't. And I don't think I know people who don't have the recognition. I mean, any one of us could talk about something. I think most of you would be able to talk about it much better than me, but my whole channel, I guess, in one way, is here's stuff I love, and that stuff can be very popular stuff like Tintin or Sandman, or it can be stuff that I think more people should talk about, like Jason or Richard Sala. So I think it's because it's just stuff I love. Now, if I talk about the Goon, I mean, there'll be some people who know the Goon and be like, what do you mean the Goon isn't well known? Of course it's well known, and of course it's widely recognized. Hellboy, I mean, it depends. So I think comics that deserve more recognition, um yeah, there are a lot of them, but it all depends on who you're talking to. I think Rick Geary is a creator that I think of like Richard Sala, where I think Rick Geary is very accessible. I think anyone can look at Rick Geary and say, this is good comics, but I don't hear people talking about Rick Geary. I mean, he used to do National Lampoon stuff early on. He's probably most famous for his series of books with NBM, the Victorian Treasury of Murder and the 20th Century Treasury of Murder, where he writes these books on real life famous murders, some of them unsolved. Jack the Ripper and Lizzie Borden and the Lindbergh child, assassination of a couple of different presidents, actually, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and but serial killers like H.H. Holmes, the Beast of Chicago. And I've made way back in the day when I started the channel, these videos on Rick Geary that nobody watched. And I don't understand why Rick Geary isn't more well known and more beloved. I love his art style. I love his approach to storytelling, which is a mixture of deadpan and winking and seriousness, but also politeness. Like he's not lascivious. He doesn't look to titillate, but the way that he puts the details across, he's talking about some horrific crimes, it's just very unique. I think it might almost fly under the radar of how much craft is there in what he does, because it's so easy to read and so easy to go through, where people might just think, it's a simple biography, or this is just, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. It's like, no, but every panel's choice and every what he puts in dialogue, what he puts in narration, I would think I always wonder why Rick Geary isn't more famous than he is. Tatsumi, lovely short stories. Yes, I'm really looking to get into New Frontier from Cook. Yeah, beautiful book. One of my favorite Absolute editions as well. Although Absolute Day Tripper is making a beeline for that top of the best absolutes, just because maybe it's the halo effect of it being something very recent. Are there prose novels you really like? Is another question Charlie Clausen asks. And Tommy Alatalo, has a similar question. Do you read regular novels? I'm frankly assuming a yes. If you do you have a favorite genre? So prose novels, I really I've read a lot of prose in my younger days, all the way up to maybe 10, 15 years ago is when I stopped reading prose fiction, as I was saying, that much. Although, I mean, every now and then I'll pick something up. Prose novels, I like. Genre, as far as genre, no, I don't have a particular genre I really like. As a kid, I liked science fiction, but I also liked, whatever was given to us as classics, a lot of British literature, a lot of 19th century literature. I do like the Russians. I'm a big fan of, as someone had mentioned, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. I like Turgenev, Fathers and Sons. I like American 20th century fiction. I like Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. That I really like that. There are other Salman Rushdie's that are not like, but Midnight's Children that's a good book. I mean, I know it's like Booker Prize winning literature, blah blah blah, but it's essentially it's like the Umbrella Academy or X-Men or something like that, with puns and Forrest Gump. It's just a fantastic piece of literature, but also very, very full of masala, and it's a pot boiler, etc. So I'm a big fan of Midnight's Children. I think if people haven't read Midnight's Children, they might be allowing its reputation or something like that to interfere. It is I mean, it could be a superhero story. I mean, it is an artistically done, philosophical, historical, literary superhero story. I mean, I think it's Xavier and Magneto, in some ways, not really, but Xavier and Magneto if they were in the Watchmen or something like that. In Watchmen, I like what other prose novels do I like? Disgrace by Coetzee was that was a good novel. But yes, it's been a while. But I like a lot of the classics. I mean, I know it's not cool to say so, but I like Moby Dick. I think it's very very well written. I like Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The Great Gatsby, yeah, it's okay, But I like science fiction novels that I read that kind of opened my mind to. I read a lot of Asimov when I was a kid, so yeah, I like that. There was Michael Chabon's Cavalier and Clay. I think I read that because it was about somebody doing comics, but then I thought I thought it was a pretty good book. But I picked up that book because I'd seen the movie Wonder Boys, and I thought Wonder Boys was a good movie. So it's kind of a mixture of things that I would like. The Jurassic Park books. I mean, I think I read Sphere a long time ago, and I thought Sphere was a fine book. I mean, it was kind of tense or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm really old, but have I read any H.P. Lovecraft? No, H.P. Lovecraft is a big hole in my reading. I've read some short stories. I read what is it? Innsmouth, the Fog. Yeah, it's just been so. Harry Potter. Yeah, I mean, I read the Harry Potter books, but I kind of I read the Harry Potter books in and I was old when I read them, so I just read them all in a Shadow over Innsmouth. That's the one. That's right. Yeah. Can you guys see me? Am I still connected? Are you? Okay, excellent. All right. Just checking. Hobbit book more than Lord of the Rings? Yes. Now, my wife Ashwita is a Lord of the Rings scholar. She is. She's. And this is like. She loves them. She's read all the books many times. She's got a tattoo from Lord of the Rings and blah blah blah. But I didn't. I could never get into them. I appreciate what they did, but as books, they never appealed to me because there was just a lot about, I don't know, like a book's got to have a certain, I don't know if I'll be able to get into that. But yes, I like The Hobbit. I thought The Hobbit was a good children's story and it was fun. And I think The Lord of the Rings has a lot of epic scope and ambition and a lot of different things happen in them. But as novels, I think they left something to be desired. As a child, I liked the books of Roald Dahl. I think he was Asimov, Roald Dahl. They're people I think kids should read because there's a certain irreverence to them that I think should be culture. Douglas Adams, I really enjoyed. Yes, Terry Pratchett is one person I need to read more of because I keep hearing a lot about Terry Pratchett, and people have told me that if I like Douglas Adams, I'll like Terry Pratchett and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, there are lots and lots of like classic books that are really good. There are lots of classic books that are not that good, I would say as well. But I like Hemingway's short stories. I'm not that big a fan of Hemingway's novels, and I tried to read a lot of that, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Hemingway, etc. And it's just like, yes, some of it is very good, some of it is not that I like For Whom the Bell Tolls. I think that's my favorite novel. But otherwise, I think of Hemingway as a short story writer. The person I really enjoy is Nabokov, who I think is just as good in the short story as he is with the novel, and that I think is fantastic. I mean, any one of those two would be fine. I think, like, say Salman Rushdie is better with the novel than with the short story, etc. But Garcia Marquez is someone whose novels and short stories I've all really enjoyed. Leaf Storm used to be, I think, Leaf Storm and The Beggar Maid by Alice Munro were my two favorite short story collections. Oh, and Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Kurt Vonnegut Jr. is also someone I think is very good at novels and short stories, both. So Leaf Storm, The Beggar Maid, Welcome to the Monkey House. Best collections of short stories. But Arthur C. Clarke, Philip K. Dick. Yes, yeah. So again, I've read like, and when I was younger, reading science fiction prose, I would read like a freight train, just like read continuously. You finish one thing, you get onto the next thing. So I think, I mean, and I read a lot, but sometimes I wonder if that's the healthiest way to read. I think maybe sometimes, and this is true for comics as well. I mean, it's true for any reading, I think, is that maybe you should pace it out, or maybe you should take your time, or maybe you should spend some time reflecting. And I think about this also with television shows, where it's very easy to just binge, just go on to the next episode, and just sort of go on. And this is a new thing, is where you'll finish something and immediately get online to see what other people think about it and say, it's like, so I think that somewhere maybe reading one thing and then sitting back and thinking about it and letting it and that's what happens. I think that's one of the reasons maybe that I like physical books, because you get to finish, you get to the end of it and you put it down, and then you wait until you get onto the next volume or the next issue or something like that, instead of just click and then it's there, just the way that Netflix, next episode is there. And you spend some time thinking about things. But oh my god, this is a big tangent from comics, but books, I mean, like, and I think it's okay, if any one of you is out there is irritated that we're not talking about comics, I apologize, that we'll get back to comics. But I do like the fact that so many of you are, I mean, like, because it's reading, right? It's like you don't necessarily think that I read short stories, I don't read novels, or I watch television series that are 10 episodes, but not television series that are 23 episodes or something like that. It's all reading and it's all literature. I mean, it's got its own vocabulary and it's got its own style, etc. But yeah, I think it's really cool to see this interest in other all forms of storytelling. Although, I mean, yes, the channel, people have asked me if I would talk about television shows based on comics or animated shows, etc. And I mean, I just think there are enough channels out there doing that, where they want to talk about all of Watchmen and everything, etc. I mean, the point I would like to present as an option, because it's all about you. You can go and watch any channel you want to. You can turn to any series, anyone who's covering anything, depending on what you want to watch. What I would like to present is something about the medium of comics that I really enjoy and I want to talk to other people about, because of, as I said at the beginning, because of the level of discovery it still holds for me, because of the idiosyncratic way that it can represent something very individual, something very unique. A comic has that permutation and combination of art and writing. So each thing is like a snowflake, like nothing is like something else, or at least it has the potential to be completely unique, because not only nobody else writes like you and draws like you, but that combination of that writing and drawing is so unique. That's why I prefer not to get into questions of television shows or video games and other things, all of which could be of interest to me in general. More questions from Tommy. Can you name two books where one is the most surprisingly good one and the other the most disappointing, based on your perceived reputation of the books before reading them? Ugh, this is one of those minefield type of questions, because no matter what you say, you're going to piss somebody off, because if you say that this surprise, this, I mean, I guess the surprisingly good one, in fact, is tougher for me, because I don't know if I've ever approached something thinking it's going to be crap or thinking it's not going to be good. Um, because I mean, usually I know something, or I have some idea about something. But I will say that and I talked about this in one of my top 10 videos. There's a web comic by Rich Burlew called The Order of the Stick. And when I first started reading that, it's because someone said, "Hey, you like RPG stuff? You like how long is it gonna go?" Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing, man. I don't know how long it's gonna go. I don't even know where I am on this list of things. But yes, so that was a web comic that someone forwarded to me and say, "Hey, you like RPG stuff? You like Dungeons and Dragons, etc." Nerd, read this comic. And I started reading it, and it was like, it was jokes about going up a level, and this is the kind of stuff I talked about. But it ended up like very quickly becoming a really good comic. Like, it had fantastic characters. They all had individual arcs and things that were compelling them. The humor was constant, and it became one of my favorite comics. And I really did not expect that to happen from a stick figure RPG spoofing, one page a gag type of thing. But it actually is this epic story that has like literally 100 characters in it at some point of time, and who all of them are, and what. Yeah, so I think, as an astonishment to me, I've had that happen with TV shows and movies and all of that stuff, many of which you jump into without knowing much about, or being surprised by. But in comics, it happens. It happens as well. And I think every now and then I might have picked up a superhero comic. I think when I was getting back into comics, there's something I talked about in my recent Day Tripper videos. When I was getting back into comics, I read The Authority, and that ended up being quite surprising. But I'd never read anything by these guys, Mark Millar or Warren Ellis. So I had no idea who they are or what they were writing. And the last comics I had read were a good, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years. And even that was like older stuff, stuff that was being reprinted. So I'd probably read Superman and Batman stories by Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams in the Batman stuff, and Kurt Swan Superman, and or some of the 1980s Superboy stuff last. And then I was reading The Authority, which kind of like really blew my mind and took me by surprise. I was like, what's going on here? That's pretty good. So so that was yeah, so that was something surprising. As far as disappointing based on reputation, I don't know. I think everyone has different tastes, and I think particularly, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like to talk about superhero comics too much, is because it's purely a taste thing. I just don't enjoy a lot of superhero stuff, but there are things that will still really, really impress me. So people will always recommend to me superhero stories, saying this one will impress you, and I'll be like, so it happens. I don't think I'll take any names, because I don't want to hurt people's feelings about books that they really like. But there have been a number of them where I completely understand that you really enjoyed that and you really like that. It just wasn't. But that's not because I'm completely against. Of course, I'm not completely against the genre and stuff like that. And some of my favorite comics are superhero comics, and I don't mean deconstructions of superhero tropes. I mean just straight up superhero comics. Of course, I enjoy many of them, but there are probably many more of those that have been suggested to me that I have felt that I'm not quite on the same page as the person who really enjoyed it and really liked it. Is this going too long? Do you guys want me to wrap up or something like that? I realize that this is not very well planned, but all right, keep talking. Okay. I hope you're talking to me. All right. um, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita. Yeah. Dark Knight Returns is the one. I mean, yeah, I mean, I really understand what it did and how important it is and how significant it is. I am. It didn't blow me away. I think it's okay. I think it's fine. I like Batman Year One a lot. That's probably my favorite superhero story because I think it's just elegant and classic and pulpy and it's just superb. Thank you. Um, but I've also enjoyed a lot of. Let's see, what are the superhero stories that I really enjoyed? I really enjoyed. Oh, I can see them from here. I enjoyed All Star Superman. I enjoy Superman for All Seasons. I enjoyed. Um, I enjoyed the Killing Joke when I first read it when I was younger, and I think every time I revisit the Killing Joke, it's less fantastic. It's less, mind-blowingly good. Whereas something like Superman for All Seasons, I think it gets better every time I read it. It seems simple, but it's actually quite elegant. Um, can you improve the image quality? This is, yeah, you miss the entire first part of this thing where I just spent, all this time trying to figure out why the image quality was so bad. It's because the wrong camera turned on, and I didn't. So I'm just recapping for anyone joining. The image quality is very bad. Pardon me, sorry about that. It's because I got the wrong camera switched on, and then I couldn't change because it would cancel the feed, and the links wouldn't work and stuff like that. So um, yeah, so I don't read a lot of superhero comics these days. I definitely don't read any of the in continuity kind of things. Some standalone what if elseworld type of things like Kingdom Come, etc., like those kind of things. If there are things like that that people recommend or that can stand by themselves, or arcs that are collected together in a way that I can read without having a larger context, because I mean, I'm really the kind of person that if you say which Robin, I will like, what do you mean which Robin? Is there more than one Robin? It's like I am that bad, because of the way I read. So when things, I read Multiversity and I didn't like it, and I was told off. I was told off, saying that people like you can't appreciate Multiversity, and I'm like, oh, all right, fine. um, but yeah, if you need a lot of context, and if you need a lot explained to you outside of the covers of the comic that you're reading, or the book that you're reading, or the movie that you're watching, if it's all about referentiality and having another context and more context, etc., etc., and I appreciate that. There are a lot of things that I appreciate that are able to mine connections and foundations that have been set in other works. And I'm a big fan of intertextuality, but primarily the story should be able to stand on its own as well, is the way I feel about it. And if the only way that I can enjoy something is to have read like 15, 16 other things, and that, I mean, all of literature is connected, and all of literature is referencing other literature. It doesn't mean that those short stories or those novels cannot be read if you haven't read something that's come before. I mean, a lot of people, for example, in India, may have read Western literature without reading the Bible or without having read the Iliad, and there can be a fair argument made that, oh, if everything is based in the Bible or the Iliad, like, fair enough, but it also kind of stands on its own. You don't have to absolutely get the reference in order to understand this novel. So I think that's the kind of stuff where it's about like, oh my God, you won't believe what they did with the X-Men this time. I'm just like, well, if I don't know what they did with the X-Men before, am I still going to enjoy it? Am I still going to love it? And that's where I think a lot of the controversial, or that's where the difference of opinion comes in, is what I look for in a story. There can be a lot of things accentuated or added to, but they can't be the primary reason. At least that's my That's my approach. More questions. Which book or books do you most hope will be released in a higher quality presentation, deluxe hardcover, etc., than what is currently available? That's a good question. And I mean, this is one question that I like to throw open to you guys. What are they? Because for me, it's more about well, it was in a good presentation, but that thing is out of print right now. So maybe I want certain things to be reprinted. And like we were talking about Usagi Yojimbo, and the like there are deluxe hardcovers, there are absolute editions, maybe there are deluxe hardcovers are my favorite way of looking at things. Slightly oversized hardcovers, still small, etc. But there are certain things, like my friends and I, we keep talking about how Mobius's work is really difficult. Well, when you're talking about like some of his most famous and classic stuff, like Airtight Garage or Blueberry, or like whether he published it under the name of Mobius or Jean Girard, it's not there. And I thought that Dark Horse was going to do that because they had the World of Edina, and then they had Inside Mobius volumes. So I thought, well, here's where you finally get Mobius in nice, good hardcovers. And apparently that's not happened. And that's one thing. Maybe it's a rights issue, maybe it's a estate thing, I don't know. But I'm surprised that it doesn't have those things out there. The I have a video called perhaps the best comic book you've never heard of, on a book called Sparks, which was published, I think, in 5 issues, and the 6th issue never published in single format, but it was completed in the trade paperback. But the trade paperback has been out of print and absent forever. And I think it's a great book. And that's one of those books, it's like maybe the only book that I know of that I have read and thought was fantastic, and almost nobody else has heard of or talks about or something like that. So Sparks is definitely a book that I think should see a hardcover. It should see a reprint of some form, at least. But I mean, there was, like there's recently I was able to I was just saying how I don't read single issues, but I was able to get my hands on a couple of issues of Kirby's 2001 Space Odyssey adaptation. And I know that he's got Blade Runner and, those kind of adaptations. So why aren't there deluxe hardcover editions of those? Because you'd think those would be sort of no-brainers to have out there, especially with the way things have gone around in geek culture, and these movies are cult favorites, and you've got Kirby adapting them. So that's again one of those questions where we're like, why why wouldn't you? Can you recommend a comic for my wife? She likes mysteries and mental puzzles, and she hates long series. All right. That's interesting. Super Spy by Matt Kint. Yeah. Meanwhile by Jason Shiga. I mean, a lot of stuff by Jason Shiga. Well, Demon has 4 volumes, and it's quite profane, but it's very clever, and it's very. But Meanwhile is a time travel, choose your own adventure tabbed book that you can never make in digital format because you've got to follow a tab, and it loops back on itself. And Super Spy is it's one of the best comics I've ever read. I love Super Spy. I'm going to make a Matt Kint video one day, and I'm going to talk about Super Spy and talk about Red Handed. So if you like mysteries and you like single volume stories, both Super Spy and Red Handed, I think are fantastic. I mean, I know some people don't like Matt Kint's art style, but I think it's perfectly suited for those stories that he's got. They're really, really fantastic. Which upcoming books are you most excited about currently? As I said, I usually don't know what's coming up. So you let me know what's coming up, and you tell me what I should be excited about. I saw an interview with, I think it was, I forget whose channel it was on. I saw the interview with Gary Groth of Fantagraphics, and Fantagraphics is going to publish Barry Windsor Smith's Monsters, and everything I've heard or read about that book sounds fantastic. So I guess that's one book I do know about, and the rest of it will be like the next volume in something that I'm enjoying reading, or I want to see continue. So those, I never know when they're going to come out, and when they do come out, when are they going to come out in a version that I want? So if the trade will come out and I want the hardcover and things like that. So there'll be certain series that I'm reading, and I want to have the next volume in those series. So those will be the ones that I'll be excited about. Have you read any comics from British 2000 AD publication? Yes, mainly Alan Moore's stuff from 2000 AD. I read some Judge Dredd. I read some. Was Slain? Slain was 2000 AD, right? So I read a couple of volumes of Slain, and I read some issues. That were more recent, which were interesting, but again, very very sporadic, nothing as continuous, because again, it's not available over here. So if 2000 AD puts together things into collections, then I'm more likely to pick them up than the issues of those things. Yes, it might have been Cartoonist Kayfabe, the Gary Groth interview. Yeah, I think that's right. That was the one. That was a great interview. I mean, like they do great interviews. Noah Van Sciver does great interviews. If you haven't checked out Noah Van Sciver's channel, I would highly recommend it. Especially his well, I mean, all of his interviews, but his interview with Eddie Campbell in particular was really, really very good. So there are a couple of channels that do very good interviews with people. I mean, and I know some people are not interested in interviews. They just rather know, and that's fine. But if you like that, but yeah, I think Gary Groth mentioned Barry Windsor Smith's Monsters, and then I looked it up after that, and it looks really good and really interesting. All right, moving right along. Any questions or any of these from over here? So the new Dune movie, I don't know. I mean, I'll see. I mean, I'll watch the movie when it comes out, and a lot of trailers kind of, I don't know. I wasn't impressed by the trailer. It looked very slick. It looked very polished, etc., etc. But anyway, that's not all right, it's not a directly comics thing, but as far as trailers are concerned, I was going to say all trailers look alike and all trailers sound alike to me. That WandaVision, the new WandaVision trailer, I like that one. That one was not what I was expecting, and it looked like, I mean, it could still be horrible, but I mean, that was one trailer that I was like, okay, that trailer feels and looks like a little different, and especially coming out of like Marvel, where you expect everything to be very formula based and very cookie cutter looking thing. I thought that was a good trailer. All right, questions from Santiago Cordoba. Which was the autobiographical comic that had the biggest effect on you when you first read it, and why? This is a very, very potent question. I think just the fact that there are autobiographical comics, just that blew my mind. And there are a lot of them, and I think it's difficult to say which is the biggest effect, because I think the first one you read, just because it tells you that there is such a thing, has an outsized effect. So so books like Fun Home, Blankets, I mean, these ones showed kind of me like what autobiography is, and how it can be very personal, and how it can be very unique, and how art can be fantastic and writing can be fantastic, but not only by itself, but the way they go together. So I think those two were good. I think an autobiography is interesting because, and I'll go on with these questions because Fun Home, Blankets, those but I want to talk about, and Santiago himself says there's a big difference between drawing someone else's, not personally known by the autobiography, like what the Talbots have done. So that's Brian and Mary Talbot doing a couple of different books, writing about a close relative or a friend's life, for example, Mouse, where Spiegelman makes the script based on conversations with his father, and writing about a first-hand individual experience like Marjan Satrapi, Persepolis, Joe Sacco, Chris, I think Chester Brown, Seth, Joe Matt. Do you prefer any of these over the others? And if so, why? So I think this is very good. And this is the very interesting thing about autobiography. For example, is Mouse an autobiography or a biography? Because it is the story of his father and his, it's about the Holocaust and the camps. So it's obviously a biography because it's someone else's life. But a lot of that book's power comes from the relationship between the son and the father. And these interviews, which may be frames or bookends or something like that, are doing a lot to inform that. And if you think about some of the sequences, not just the concentration camp sequences, but the sequences of the comic where it's Spiegelman thinking about the legacy that has him. Like there's that famous panel of him sitting on top of a whole mountain of dead mice, of where he conceives of himself as a human being wearing the mask of a mouse. It's very much about him, and it's very much about his approach to that thing. So I would say that that's kind of got to do with him. It's interesting that you mentioned the Talbots, because I did think about, because Brian and Mary Talbot have the Red Virgin. They've got a couple of books that are biographies of other people, but the first collaboration of theirs that I read was this book, Daughter of Her Father's Eyes. And Daughter of Her Father's Eyes is very interesting. It's a slim little book, but this is a very interesting book because it's both a biography and autobiography, because Mary Talbot tells the story of James Joyce's daughter, but she also tells the story of her relationship with her father, and the two lives, the two daughters, and her father, Mary Talbot's father, was a Joyce scholar. So again, is that biography or is that autobiography, or is that both? So obviously, when we look at something like Persepolis, we can say it's autobiography. When we look at something like Joe Sacco, it's a little harder because he is doing reportage. He's out in the field and he's interviewing people, and he's sort of unearthing a story that he wants to research, but he's also very much a part of that story. In fact, what I really enjoyed about Joe Sacco when I first read him was he didn't try to make himself invisible, and he would say that, these people keep bothering me with this, and he would give his reactions, which is very different from that fly on the wall, pretend I'm not here sort of thing. So I think I like all forms of autobiography that have somebody in them. I think I've read a lot of autobiographical comics. I've read a lot of autobiographical comics that I found to be very, very good. I've read a fair number that I've not found to be very good, that I found to be, self-indulgent and navel-gazing and things like that. A recent autobiography that I really enjoyed was Noah Van Sciver's One Dirty Tree, which I thought was a very good story about family and archaeology. And let me see, did I bring out copy over here? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I tried to get some books out for this call, but then I ran out of space on my table, so I stopped doing that. So yeah, I do actually have a copy over here. This one was a very good book about a whole bunch of children and in a house, and there's a danger of sentimentality, which I think good writers are able to step outside of, where they're not indulgent and where they're not trying to exploit something, but at the same time have a very clear-eyed view. But it's a clear-eyed view of something that they were involved in, so it's difficult to do. Another autobiographical book that I think, and this is Blue Pills by Frederick Peters, which I think is also one of those books that I wonder why more people don't talk about, which is an astonishing sort of story about a relationship with an HIV positive woman and her son. It's superb, and it really is a terrific work of self discovery. You're learning something, and then you read it as a reader, and you learn the same things that he learned. And so that's a very unique way of doing that. But I also appreciate biographies, and I also appreciate stories about someone else's life that have been done as research. I know I talked a little bit about Reinhard Kleist and the biographies he has of Nick Cave and of Johnny Cash. Uh, and Jim Ottaviani is a person who has written Feynman, which is one of my favorite comics, and it's a biography. It's a story of Richard Feynman. And Jim Ottaviani has a whole bunch of biographies. He's got one on Alan Turing called The Imitation Game. He's got one on Stephen Hawking that I haven't yet read. He has a book called Dignifying Science, which is biographies of women in science. And there's one more. Blue Pills should be. Oh, okay. It should be a high school read. Yes, I agree. I mean, I thought it was a high school read, and I was like, which high school is Blue Pills a read in? Turmina Video by Pat Grant was a terrific webcomic, which you can find online. I linked it in my Pat Grant video. That is indeed a heartbreaking comic. And yeah, Joe Sacco puts himself in his stories and doesn't shy away from criticizing himself. That's the kind of warts and all look. And even though the story is not about you, the fact that, like I think I think it was in Palestine or maybe Safe Area Gorajda, where he goes to visit somebody, and then they are telling him the story of this suffering, and they're also serving, and he's so hungry, and he's just thinking about the food and eating the food while they're telling the story. And it was very interesting because you get their story in the comic. It's there in the narration boxes, but you also have him over there sort of ignoring the story to eat the food. But obviously he didn't ignore it because he has drawn and written it. I mean, it's such a complex and clever way of doing a couple of different things at the same time that I thought was very very interesting. Primates, that's the one. Thank you, Gautam. Primates is the other Jim Ottaviani book, which is about three women who worked with primates. So it's three biographies in one book. He's really good. So I mean, if you've got people like Ottaviani, if you've got people like Reinhard Kleist, and there are some people who've done both, right? So Chester Brown has the Louis Reel biography, and then he's got stories about himself. And Guy Delisle usually wrote stories about himself, and then he wrote Hostage, which is someone else's story. And Jason wrote fiction until On the Camino, which is a wonderful little autobiographical book. So again, I like people who can work in novels and short stories. There are some people who can work with autobiography and fiction and nonfiction really well. Tom Barnett, my question for you: are there any books that you loved, but upon further reading, you found them even better? Even better, yes, that's all the books. Most of the books that I talk about on this channel have really amplified their presence over time. So there are, every now and then there'll be books that I read, and then when I revisited them, that I didn't like so much, but then I'm not going to sit down and make a video about them. So I think most books I find to be, I think most literature, and that doesn't have to be comics, rewards revisitation. And you find more things. And it's because someone, when, like, let's just say reading prose, it takes you 2 seconds to read a sentence, but it took someone a long time to write that sentence, and then they had to think about all the sentences that came before and the sentence. So a lot of thought went into it. And so really good writers, really good artists, they put a lot of care and thought into what they're doing. And therefore, it rewards coming back to it, because then you unpack it in a way that more closely matches their efforts, because they spent a lot of time on it, even if it doesn't seem like a lot of time, and like someone like never missed a deadline or something like that. That's not what I mean. What I mean is their craft has a lot of thought in it. So I think most books I find to get better, most good books get better on second reading. Yeah, I mean, and I've seen, and there is a point over here that Jonathan makes, saying it burns some comics artists out that their life work can be read and dismissed within an hour's time, and that's true. I mean, and I think that's anything can be dismissed. I mean, it doesn't take much energy to dismiss something, and it doesn't snark. And criticism, or loose criticism, really isn't much effort. But sometimes I think people don't take care about things, and I think there are some conversations and questions that we had. You know, we had this question about, oh, about derivative stuff, and maybe there's a question coming up of where something just doesn't seem interesting enough, or it just seems like something we've seen before. And I think everything will have some effort, but it doesn't have that kind of effort of creating, of crafting. So sometimes I think phoning it in is the way that we phrase it. Where someone, it's a paycheck job. They're not really putting their heart and soul into it. It's just something they can toss off because they got bills to pay and get them a paycheck. And I think it shows sometimes. And sometimes I think people are good enough to where they can even put that. So I think it all depends on the situation that you're talking about. But yes, I think there are some people out there whose work, and some of them are obvious choices, like Chris Ware. You come back to Chris Ware, every time you come back to Chris Ware, you'll find something more. So there was a question, I think, over here, is that, do you think there'll be a sequel to Rusty Brown? I mean, I know that there's supposed to be a second part, but if there isn't, you can just reread Rusty Brown and pretend it's a sequel. Just take a whole new reading of it and just read things that you didn't read into it before, or notice things that you didn't notice before, because it's because you can do that. You can do that with Chris Ware. You can do that with a lot of people. I think you can do that with Seth. And it's very different from Chris Ware. And I think that's what I mean when I think of certain comics are not for me anymore, because I'm not dissing anyone who enjoys them. I just like reading things that like nestle with you and stay with you. And it's the same for movies, it's the same for novels, it's the same for TV shows and stuff like that. If you've got care taken about something, I think it shows, and it has an effect. So oh. Well, all right. Okay, I'm moving on. Someone just said that we've hit the 2-hour mark. That's ridiculous. And I apologize for that, especially with such a crappy video. But I don't do these things, so I'm not really sure of how it should be done. Maybe I shouldn't have merged the Q&A with the live thing. I think maybe that's a little too much. Earl Grey. Earl Grey is one of those people whose channels on YouTube really inspired me before I started my own channel, because I started this episode talking about, when someone asked about why I have this channel, etc. I said that, I didn't find channels that I would have wanted to watch, or the kind of thing. Is like, the exception to that is Earl Grey, because Earl Grey talks about comics in a way like the other people that I had mentioned before, like about what that comic makes to them, how it was. A large part of how I like to talk about comics is autobiography, because I'm not trying to say I understand art. I don't say that, I understand writing or technical aspects of production or anything like that. It's just like, this is how it felt to me, and this is how it seems to me. And Earl Grey's videos showed me that you could make videos on European comics and on non-superhero comics, and you can make comics about like how you can make videos on how those comics affected you and how you could read them. So I'm very flattered to have him ask questions. So he asked, what kind of comics are absolutely not your thing? Or are there some comics that you're sure you'll never ever want to read, and why? I don't know. I mean, I guess once I start reading a comic, I can decide if that's not my thing, but I don't know if that's a category. Because as I said, I don't read in continuity superhero stories, but then every now and then I might find, I mean, chances are low, but I've found good continuity superhero stories as well, or good standalone pieces within a continuity thing. And the reason I don't like them isn't because they're not good stories or something like that. It's just that I don't have the context for them. I guess if there is such a thing as extreme, I don't know. Are there such comics as it's just like extreme violence and just fighting all the time? I mean, if there is such a thing, I guess a certain kind of, I think someone had mentioned before, 90s superhero comics, just like beat 'em ups, and just like the whole thing is just one long fight sequence, or someone's got a purple laser and someone's got a green beam, and I don't know what these things do, etc. I mean, they're not my thing because they kind of bore me. So if you can hold my interest doing that stuff, I think it'll there. And certain kinds of comics that you're sure you'll never ever want to read, I don't know. Maybe I think I know that there are like um teen romance manga, or because, and the only reason I say manga is not because in manga you've got a lot of genre. There's manga for every type of readership. So I don't know if there are American comics that go after the teen romance crowd or something like that. But I guess that's not my thing. Although again, I could be surprised. There might be something that is really well observed and very wonderfully portrayed. Which cancelled title, this is a question from DB, which cancelled title do you consider the biggest loss? I don't know how to answer this question because I don't know about cancelled titles, because I don't read monthlies. I don't have a pull list and I don't go to a comic shop. So I'm not really following things as they go. I mean, I guess I could think of which comic do I wish there was more of, or something like that, from plans, etc. So I know that the Ballad of Halo Jones was something that was supposed to be 9 volumes, or 3 big parts, and only one part of it got done, which is the Halo Jones we know today. And I've always thought that, as great as that is as an end, and you can just take that as an end and it works fine, I would have loved to read more Halo Jones. That's just I love that comic by Alan Moore and Ian Gibson. So that was really, really good. um Is there a line when you no longer give a book or a story your attention? Um, I mean, with prose novels, it works that way, because a prose novel, if you're not enjoying it, can just stretch forever. With a movie, I never abandon movies. Even if I'm not liking a movie, I'll usually get to the end of a movie. With a TV show, it's somewhere in between. It's like, if I'm not into it, and if I'm not getting into it, or if it's really irritating me. So I don't know where comics fall as far as that is concerned. Have I ever abandoned reading a comic halfway through? Probably, but that probably means that it wasn't very memorable. So I don't remember which comic that was, but I probably didn't read it. Then it just sat on the shelves, and then I sold it or traded it or something like that. I Yes, it is. It is. You should give things a shot. And sometimes, especially in long series, people say, "Oh, it gets really good from," but it's a little nerve wracking if someone says, "Oh, it gets really good from the 7th volume onwards." And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I've got to now read 7 volumes in order to get it to be really good. Can I just start at the 7th volume? It's like, no, but then you won't know who his uncle is. So I'm like, okay. So I guess there's always a lot to read. So if someone says that's really good, but you've got to wade through 6 volumes before you get to the really good stuff, you're like, well, I think that thing is good from volume 1 onwards. So, but at the same time, if it was that way, then, like, for example, Fables doesn't have the greatest first volume. I would say, even, and I know this sounds sacrilegious, I would say that you've got to Usagi Yojimbo. It's like it takes off after a while. It's not fantastic from the very beginning. So it does. Joseph's question, which he had asked, and I'd said I'm saving it for later. I will answer it now. It's like, discuss balancing indulgence and escapism with outside life. And this is an important question, because I think it is a question anyone who reads fiction and anyone who watches entertainment and all that stuff really has to ask themselves. One, a facetious answer is, outside life if we can call it that, isn't all that great, So if I was to concentrate only on outside life, or if I concentrate on what's going on in the world right now, it's pretty aggravating. So there is something to be said about escapism, because especially when you have a certain kind of poison, or a certain kind of anger, or a certain kind of frustration or helplessness, etc., it's a great, I think it's a great important thing to have escapism. But the real answer, I think, is I don't think of it as escapism. I don't think of it as a retreat. I think of, and this is the way I've thought for a long time now, is I think that literature and art give me a way of dealing with life, because all of life is homogeneous. It's not one thing that is true for everybody. It is, if you're in existentialism and all that stuff, it is about the way you interpret things, and the way you behave, and the way you act makes a difference to how the world is. You make a difference to the world. You make a difference through your behavior. You make a difference through how you address things. So therefore, I find that in immersing yourself in art, in literature, in the best, you expose yourself to ideas, you expose yourself to questions, you expose yourself to scenarios, and you undergo, maybe through the skin of somebody else, maybe through the somebody else's story or something like that, you undergo experiences, and you see things, and you travel, and the range of your experience is broadened, and that affects the manner in which you behave with other human beings, and how you behave in society, and how you treat other people, and how you behave to a policy in that the government is trying to pass, or one you don't agree with, and how you choose to align yourself politically. All of these things, they don't come to you from birth. They come to you from influences which could be loud and shrieky and one-dimensional and inherited, or they could be complex and approaching things from myriad points of view. And I think literature and art and stories allow you to have that. So I think while it is important that you have escapism, and while it is important that you have an ability to step away from something that is very dirty or very poisonous, or etc., at the same time, I also think it's not necessarily only about escapism. I just think that it's about, can you relate, and how you relate, what are the mechanisms that you use. And I find no greater instrument for honing that than literature, in my experience, or art, if you want to just take, that's what its role is whether you talk about empathy, or whether you talk about human behavior, all of these things, we are taught these from somewhere. We could be taught by our parents or our grandparents, we could be taught by our neighbors, or we could be taught through art. It comes from many sources. So therefore, I think that it's never really a question of balance. If I chose to drink myself into a stupor every day, or consume drugs in order to not deal with something, that's one thing. If I chose to only focus on something that has absolutely no relation to the way I think, I understand your point. There is a certain amputation over there, but at least I don't need to worry about that, I feel, because I don't think about these things as amputation. In fact, it might be the other way around. I might think about it as crystallizing, making things clearer, making things sharper. I don't know if that answers your question, but I really think that's the way stories and fiction and literature, all of which I consider comics to be a part of, to be part of that same thing. I Kill Giants is a story. Yeah, I really like I Kill Giants. I think that's a and I think there are a couple of such stories that I've seen in comics and in movies and things like that, where it's just like, how does someone deal, and so they have this kind of break from reality, etc., which is which is usually the way it's presented. But I also like it when those breaks from reality aren't really breaks from reality. So some genre stuff will turn that around to where they say that ignition of a true reality that other people don't see, or it was a singularity of clarity and vision, etc., etc. And I like that metaphor as well. So you've got one aspect where you're like, okay, this person is broken, and that's why they're manufacturing these things as an escape. And then there are other things. Well, what makes them mad makes them a prophet, or the clown is the person who tells the truth, Shakespearean fool, blah blah blah. It's those kind of things. Is that layering of complexity that I really like in stories. Okay, last section, maybe. I think this has gone on for quite a long time. I have a lot of questions over here about specific artists, writers, and publishers. So I'm gonna try and go through them like that. All right. What are your favorite Asterix albums? I'm going to make a separate video on that. I'm waiting to complete my Asterix collection. I have a favorite. I have a favorite Asterix album that is as unquestionable as my favorite Tintin album, because there is only one correct answer. I mean, I'm joking, of course. But so I think Asterix can be divided into two categories. One where Asterix leaves his village and travels, and two, when people or trouble come to the village. So this might be an unpopular opinion. I really like the ones where trouble comes to the village. I mean, Asterix traveling the world and going to different countries and making fun of different countries is always fun. But I really like it when people come and mess with, with what's there. So that's a clue. All right. So my favorite Asterix album is one that falls into that category of where someone comes here. So it's not The Banquet or in Belgium or Britain. Or what are your favorite Franco-Belgian comic series other than Tintin? Well, there's Tintin, there's Asterix. Have you read any of the Josette and Jocko series by Hergé? What about Hergé's? So I've got questions from Pratyay. I've got questions from Sagnik about Josette and Jocko, Quick and Fluke. I haven't read anything outside of one story, The Valley of the Cobras, which I read when I was very young. So I really should read more. I'm reading more European comics. Those of you who've been following this channel, I thought this would go quickly. I know. I mean, I think, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. I've been reading more. So I started reading Blake and Mortimer, and I've read about 4 Blake and Mortimer stories that I think are quite good. I read, but one, I've really enjoyed the Smurfs by Peo since I was a kid, and I recently revisited them thanks to IDW's reprints, and they're still good. They hold up, and there's something about those stories that I don't know. I don't know if the comics or I mean the cartoons or the movies kind of ruin their reputation or enhance their reputation. I don't know, but the comics are really, really good, and they're very well drawn. So I guess outside of Tintin and Asterix, it would be the Smurfs. Have you read the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels? Yes, I have. They're fantastic. They're really good. I mean, I didn't know about them until the movie was announced, and then I sought them out. So I think there were only 3 of them out there. So I read the first 3, and then I had to wait for the rest to be published one by one, or something like that, because it was one of those things where I caught up really fast, and then I had to wait for each volume to come out. And I thought they were very good, and they were very well done. And that's also a series that got better with every single volume. I mean, by the time, I think the second to last volume might be my favorite volume, just from the point of view of how those expressions and how the chemistry between the characters was working at that time. Abhishek Sen, for those of you who do not know, Abhishek Sen is a friend of the channels and runs our Instagram. So if you see anything on Instagram, it's Abhishek doing his magic over there. And his question is, Brian K. Vaughan or Box Brown? Who's your pick and why? He's just trying to get me into trouble over here, because this is an impossible question. Brian K. Vaughan or Box Brown? I like both of them. So I'm not going to try to dignify this with any debating kind of answer. I'll just cheat over here and say, because Box Brown writes and draws, I'll say Box Brown, because Brian K. Vaughan otherwise would be, if I had to just pick one, I would just get Prose. So moving right along. Rajat Sen asks about a publisher called Gotham Comics in India. And this is a good question, but I am not the person to talk about this. So, what I would like to do is get back to this question one future day. But I have a number of friends, two in particular, I'm thinking of, who are experts, who know about Gotham Comics, who know what happened, etc. So maybe this is something that I can address on a community post or on Facebook. So I'll reply to you once I have something to put up for you over there. Similarly, Earl Grey again has a question on Tintin, where he says Tintin has become an issue for a lot of people over here because of Hergé's colluding with the Nazis and anti-Semitic and racist connotations in parts of his work. Does this take away from the enjoyment for you? And this is also one of those questions that I think is going to take a while for me to answer, because someone a long time ago asked me to make a video called Is Tintin racist? And I've been thinking about that for now a couple of years. It's just like, what does that mean? Is the character racist? Was the creator racist? And I honestly have a very limited view of the history. So from what little I know, I don't know if it's collusion. I know he continued to work for a magazine that he was working for before the Nazis came in. But once the Nazis came in and took over the magazine, they kept him employed and he continued creating the comic strip over there. As far as the connotations within the tech, and I think that's the really difficult part. And that's the one that I think I would need to deal with in almost a separate, and because of my wastage of time, I've really botched it up over here. YouTube establishes a bigger asymmetry between the speaker and the people answering. Absolutely, it does. Unfortunately, this is like, I'm approaching this as a Q&A. So these are questions that people are asking me. So I just went off on this as, this is me answering the question. But I think that's why I would want to have something like a Discord channel in which we can chat about things on a regular basis. And this one is more about, all right, here is an opinion that I have. And yeah, I think I do have some very interesting questions, but I think that this has gone on for so long that maybe I'll come back to this second batch of questions in a different video. Maybe I won't make that live and get distracted by all you wonderful people and your conversation over here, which I'm trying to keep like one eye on. I think we would I can come back to these questions next month or after some weeks in a separate video, probably with better lighting, because it's been 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours, I think. And Jorge, the kind of question that you're talking about, let's bring it forward again in video comments or something like that, because I really think that that's a great way to start off something like a Discord channel, to say that here's a topic and what does everyone think about it, and have everyone discussing it or talking about it over there. I would love to have a starting point. I think with technology we can figure out what works best in which, like live is good for certain things, chat is good for certain other things, blogs are good for certain other things. And that's kind of one of the things that I talked about when I was talking about Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. It's not just the same thing over and over again. You do want them to be different, because different mediums and different platforms have different strengths. So in conclusion, what I think we would do is, tell me in the comments once this finishes, if it ever finishes, once we do this, we will have Hamza Gardi. Hi, I glad I caught you and saw your comment. Yes, it's been going, it's like there's no way people are missing this if it goes on for as long as it has. But leave comments when this when this gets posted as a video, and tell me what you'd like to have on a Discord channel and what you would like to have on a live video, and what you would like, because I'm just, as I say, I'm just working this stuff out myself. So most of the time I don't know what I'm doing, as evidenced by the horrible camera and lighting conditions over here. And we'll go from there. So every step that we take, hopefully, can get better and more suited to what people are looking for. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for sticking around as long as you have. And yes, let us know if you would like more regular live videos. Maybe then we can keep, and tell me what your ideal is. No, Jorge, I don't. I absolutely. I'm absolutely with you on that. Thank you so much. But let me know what your ideal length of time for a live video is, because I realize that some people join in later and some people drop out and stuff like that. But I obviously have no clue. So let me know. And thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Excellent stuff. Thank you very much. And I'll see you soon. Take care.